All right. It looks like we're live.
We are.
All right. We'll start in just a few minutes, everyone. Get your cup of coffee, and we'll give you a few minutes to sip. All right. Okay, you guys ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Alyssa Arroyo, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session on top trends driving enterprise test data management. Our presenters today are Wes Floyd and Larry King from K2View. Wes and Larry together bring a combined experience of over 20 years serving enterprises in data-intensive operational and analytical workloads. The session today is being recorded and will be made available on the Bright Talk platform after the webinar ends. During the presentations, we'll show 4 poll questions to which we would love to receive your responses. The anonymized statistical results of the polls will be shared with the audience. At the end of the session, we'll have time for Q&A, so please jot down your questions at any time by selecting the question mark on the right-hand side of your screen. We will address as many of these as time allows. With that, let's get started, and I'll turn it over to you, Larry.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that very much. So let's get rolling here. I just want to also extend my thanks to all of you who are taking some time to spend with us this morning. Just very briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with K2View, we were founded a bit over 10 years ago, and we have a proven track record in Fortune 1000 companies delivering enterprise data integration and management. The core of our offering is an operational data fabric. It enables large enterprises to deliver a real-time view of customer and business data to any consuming application. So with this quick snapshot of who we are, let's move on to our agenda for today's session. Again, we appreciate very much that you're spending some of your time with us, and we hope that we'll share with you some trends that are useful. And these are trends that we are seeing relative to test data management. And we hope that you can use them to improve your test data management processes, or maybe even just help getting your TDM program off the ground. We'll spend a bit of time on the trends related to application modernization, and then share with you some data related to cost justifications our clients have used in their programs. And then we'll spend a bit of time on the specific tactical challenges we're still seeing with accessing and managing test data. And then we'll give you a very lightweight look at K2View, TDM. So the trends that I'm going to share with you here are by no means the product of a specific scientific study or market analysis. Hang on one second here. I got a little latency on my side. Let me advance this through. Apologize for that. But these are a reflection of the drivers of TDM that are conveyed to us by our customers and our partners. So overarching everything and nearly some type of driver of every TDM project is application modernization and a desire to move to a microservices architecture. Integrating test data into CI/CD pipelines is a big trend too, and oftentimes we hear that you guys are telling us some version of a story that kind of sounds like a chicken and egg story about CI/CD integration and application modernization. Enabling self-service test data where you can truly get the data that you want whenever you want it is more of a tactical capability of TDM, but nonetheless, it's always an explicit ask. And a sub-bullet we hear here is, I want to reserve the test data for me so that no one can overwrite my work and my data, so it doesn't take me back to square one. Masking data is always a top requirement, and we're seeing an increasing trend in the need to mask more modern data architectures like Kafka streams, and masking unstructured data like check images or images from other types of contracts or transaction documents. And finally, without fail, we hear you guys tell us of what amounts to wanting test data that is enterprise aware. Everything must have referential integrity. And from the masking of our structured data and unstructured data to how we deal with synthetic data and all of that across our data sources as well as our targets. All right, so if it's not already obvious to you why test data is so important, let me share with you a couple of commercial data points from the marketplace and then a data point from Gartner. The technology transformation underway right now is actually quite significant. You don't have to look too far to find something publicly printed that talks about what organizations are doing to try to transform and modernize their infrastructures and their enterprises. These trends in TDM that we talked about previously were born from or were exacerbated by real business initiatives that affect us. And we've all tried to get our processes changed, or we've all tried to be involved in some initiative to implement new technology. And internally, many times we get faced with some significant headwinds. Right now, we're probably in one of those rare moments where we've got some very, very fertile technology justification grounds. And you can see that by a couple of these publicly available quotes. Wells Fargo has made it very known that they need to be more open and leverage APIs for their customer base. AT&T has been very public about their modernization efforts and recently announced a big deal with Microsoft to use Azure. And CVS's technology initiatives, as you see here, are CEO level initiatives because of the strategic nature of them to the business. In a few slides, we'll dig into how AT&T is scaling their TDM practice a little bit, and we'll use that TDM initiative to help to address some of their technology transformations. But before we move on to that, let me dig into this data point from Gartner. Now, some of you really value analysis from Gartner, and if you do, this will be very useful to you. In July this past summer, Gartner published a report that TDM is inconsistently adopted. And if you want the benefits of shifting to DevOps, current TDM or old school TDM, it's just not suitable. Gartner projects that the adoption of DevOps TDM is getting into full swing right now. And if you look at this hype cycle curve, you can see in the red box, the DevOps test data management, that during the next 5 to 10 years, the laggards who wait for the time when they perceive the risk to be the lowest will ultimately invest in DevOps TDM as well and realize those benefits. Okay, so we mentioned that we've got a poll question. So we'll go ahead and post this first poll question. So if you just look right below the presenter window, there's a tab that says vote. And if you just take a minute to respond to this poll question, all the answers are anonymous, and you'll see that the results are tabulated in real time as you respond. So we'll pause here for just a couple of seconds and let you hopefully respond to that. And these results will be available to everyone to see. Okay, moving on. The top trend on our list is application modernization. 100% of our TDM customers have application modernization use cases driving the need for better test data. And really, when you think about it, it's no wonder application modernization is such a huge trend with all the benefits that come in customer experience, increasing innovation, reducing costs, just to name a few. In 2011, Gartner introduced the 5 R's model that looks a little bit like this. And when you consider the value of the cloud from these methods, one can deduce that the more value desired, the greater the need for better test data management. Rehosting or lifting and shifting applications to the cloud as is, that really only just begins to allow organizations to realize the full benefits of the cloud. Replatforming, of course, is a step further in the right direction, but it still won't leverage the cloud fully. Back in 2017, Oracle had published a report that there are 38 billion active JVMs. And even though companies have adopted a cloud native first strategy today, the number of active JVMs still in use today, that alone signals that there's a massive amount of refactoring, rebuilding, re-architecting that is taking place to take full advantage of the cloud and is driving a greater need for more testing and better test data management. Okay, this next slide here, after I get it built out, is going to be one of those slides where if you're ever going to take a screenshot of a presenter's slides, I would use this one. Given the measurable benefits of CI/CD integration, the desire for more automation and shifting left is driving the demand for TDM and has CI/CD integration high on this list of trends. So let me go ahead and start to build this one out for us. As you see this data here, perhaps this might help to give you some additional information that you can use in your own efforts to grow your TDM program at your organization. So looking at this box marked 1 here, the immediate availability of test data helps to reduce redundant costs like non-prod instances. Up to 90% of non-prod instances are redundant. If we look at this box 2, we see that other cost-saving opportunities in that 25% of non-prod servers are static to a single team, because oftentimes the test data management lacks an enterprise representation, which thereby then causes the ability for organizations to serve the needs of all application teams. And it unfortunately creates a situation where TDM gets implemented in silos. So as I build this out and I get to the next couple of data points on this slide, we'll look at a quality perspective. And so here at box 3, 29% of application outages are caused by defects. And in order to support shifting left, reliable enterprise data enables the early and often testing required to increase testing coverage and find defects that cause outages. And finally, here in box 4, we'll see that if developers aren't spending their time in rework, they can actually improve the time to market and velocity by about 30 to 50%. And both of these things, of course, are expected when it comes to application modernization initiatives. All right, it's time for poll question number 2. So if you could go ahead and make sure that this one is live, Alyssa. And again, all of the responses are anonymous. These results should be visible to you all in real time. So I'll give you just a couple more seconds here to respond. Okay, so despite everything that we've covered on these first couple of trends and the strategic nature of software development today and the financial benefits, we still see that companies are still massively reliant on data architects and DBAs or engineers to identify, mask, and provision test data. And many times, provisioning the data is an all or none proposition. So there's some reliant on batch syncing that occurs at a periodic schedule, one time a month, a quarter, a year, et cetera. And the data, unfortunately, is presented to QA and dev and treated as just data tables versus data with business context. So the next 2 slides that we're going to go through here will cover the last 3 trends on our list, which are explicit TDM capabilities. And to paint this picture, let's kind of look at the scenario which reflects what we consistently hear that testers don't want. So in this scenario, if I'm a tester and I want to get 2,000 customers to run my test cases, the testers have to wait for a DBA or an architect, and maybe even on some, again, periodic schedule to provision the data over to the testing environments. The challenges with this approach are many, as you see here. Data is not enterprise aware. It lacks referential integrity. Masking rules aren't applied uniformly between source and target so that all sources are being masked consistently, regardless of the source or the target data. Data dependencies get lost. Testers ultimately have to sift through tables of data versus data being organized relative to the business process or application service. Unstructured data is not available or unmasked, whereas unmasked and modern data structures just aren't available. It takes time to move this data in bulk, and storage and compute resources are unnecessarily consumed. Multiple technology teams need to be engaged in this kind of a scenario, and separate copies per application are often created. Tester downtime can be experienced, and when you're waiting for data like this, sometimes test coverage just ends up being poor. Data becomes stale many times in these situations due to scheduled or batch processing. All right, so before we pop up what testers do want, Alyssa, we're to our 3rd poll question.
Okay.
And again, responses are anonymous here, so we appreciate you guys participating in the poll.
This one's a little longer, so you might want to give them a minute.
Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to what testers do want. And what they want, they tell us, is control over their own destiny. They want a self-service user interface available via automation. They want to be able to go into a user interface and through a few drop-down picks, specify the criteria that they want. So let's say that I'm a tester and I want 2,000 customers, and it's got to contain that data, all of my very specific criteria about those customers from a particular region, a particular dollar amount of transaction, particular number of products that they have. And I want that data from any data source, including modern data sets like event streams and unstructured data. And the data must have referential integrity across all sources and applications to maintain all dependencies among sources and applications. And then all of the PII has got to be masked consistently, regardless of the target. And it's got to be available to me in minutes. And I don't want to have to worry about anybody else trampling all over my work. So I want to reserve the data for me so I don't lose that work. This is the kind of level of control that I want when I get to control my own TDM destiny. So given the difficulties that we see that organizations are still having in achieving this level of test data management capability, we do think that there is a novel approach to trying to solve this problem. And let's just take a look at the results that AT&T is generating using K2View TDM. AT&T has about 600 data sources and uses 4,000 applications to run their consumer and business segments. There are 1,000 testers using K2View TDM. And like many large enterprises, application modernization, as we saw from the information on their website, has been a very strategic undertaking by AT&T. Related to the application modernization efforts is also an initiative to further embrace the shift to the left methodology. And broadly speaking, AT&T wanted to improve their test data load times and automated manual test data provisioning to support their app modernization and DevOps initiatives. The previous process was very slow, cumbersome, very slow speeds to get to market. And then, as with many organizations, there's times when budget cuts are presented, and AT&T was looking for an opportunity to cut some budgets without compromising their objectives. So AT&T implemented K2View TDM, which is connected to source systems and creates an enterprise view of data for testing. Not only is there self-service user interface available, but the TDM solutions are also integrated to all of their other tools and applications. AT&T was able to uniformly apply masking rules and other necessary logic among their data sources and targets for referential integrity of all their data. Now, there are two areas where AT&T was able to realize their initial cost savings very early on. One was by reducing the costs associated with regression test automation, where they were able to realize about a 50% reduction in the costs associated with regression test automation. And then two, AT&T had a very particular target to reduce defects and have successfully been able to reduce their defect density. Now, for the business where risk and confidence and reliability in applications is really important, the app teams wanted to improve confidence and reliability. And so they were able to increase the regression coverage to nearly 100%. And then they were also able to increase the progression test automation coverage by 70%. So for AT&T, the net result of embracing this approach to TDM is an 80% improvement in speed to market, test data that's provisioned on demand in minutes, with 30% fewer manual testing resources. Okay, so with all of that, let me hand the reins over to Wes, who's going to take you through a few of these concepts in greater detail, which were used by AT&T.
All right. Thank you, Larry. So, hey, everyone, this is Wes Floyd. I'm very glad to take you guys through a little more technical detail on how AT&T accomplished each of those important success criteria. The first piece is that in AT&T's environment, just like many other large enterprise environments, there's going to be a great diversity on the source environments. There's going to be mainframe systems. There's going to be data warehouse systems, each with their own interconnected processes. And then on the target side, from a test data provisioning side, there's going to be similar amount of complexity. There may be different amount of systems that need to be provisioned for test purposes. They may also be on different platforms as well. So there's a lot of transformation that's going to happen. There's a lot of different cross-versioning that's going to happen across these systems. And so the flexibility of the test data management process technology is going to be extremely important. We'll talk about moving data across different technologies, across different versions. We also want to empower those testers to have their own UI to come in and say, I want to provision test data based on my understanding of the business. I want to have a menu where I can come in and I can say, I want my data right now and I want it in this format. Because the traditional approaches that Larry had referred to before and some of the challenges were that the data engineer is required for this process, and there's a timing aspect. So we want to speed up the process, make it very comfortable for the testers to provision data. And very often testers are not testing on the existing legacy systems. There's going to be a new mobile application. There's going to be a new chatbot application. And those applications themselves are going to require synthesizing and creating net new test data. So one of the interesting things is once you have this, this intermediary, we'll talk about in a second, called the digital entity, how we can create new data sets for new applications and new databases that didn't exist in the past. One of the important things that AT&T was required to do, which a lot of large enterprises are doing today, is dealing with unstructured data, data that may not be in traditional relational forms. It may be in chat text. It may be in images, scanned images, checks, statements, all these sorts of things. So all the traditional legacy requirements around masking the data, replacing the data, discovering sensitive PII still apply, but they apply in very new data types. So the flexibility to manage those new data types as you're moving through test data is critical for new TDM teams going forward. And then also the overriding theme is shifting left. And so if you're going to shift left, if you're going to accelerate your application delivery timelines, you're also going to have to accelerate your test timelines, which means your test data provisioning. So all the great advances that have happened in the CI/CD cycle, Agile software delivery, those are going to require that your test data management platform is fully API compatible. So if you're running Jenkins or GitHub Actions, or whichever your CI/CD pipeline is, that it can, as it's provisioning and building the software, it can also build and provision the test data to support it. And then last, but very much table stakes for any enterprise platform, is that you have the role-based controls in place so that as you're giving testers much more latitude and flexibility to provision test data on demand, you're also ensuring that all the proper enterprise controls are in place. The data is masked as it should be, whether the data is coming from production to a lower environment or from the test data warehouse to a lower environment, that those controls are in place and the audit controls are in place as well. So the biggest differentiator from a K2View perspective is this innovative approach we call the digital entity. And the cornerstone of the digital entity is modeling the business based on the way that the testers view the data. Very often testers are aligned with the line of business and the applications that they serve. So they think about the data in terms of customer or in terms of the customer's card or maybe a network device that the customer has. And so we'll show you in just a minute how once you start to frame the data behind TDM and the test data warehouse around this business entity, this digital entity, that gives you tremendous flexibility to decouple the source side and the target side. And even further, once you start to frame the test data around the digital entity, you can start to combine the digital entities like Lego bricks. So you can say, I want a certain profile of customer with this type of account status. And also I want a customer that has had a certain number of credit cards and credit cards in a certain status as well. So we're really shifting the conversation from the older approach, which was very schema, table-based, to a much more business-friendly approach. And behind the scenes, there's lots of important engineering and plumbing to manage that decoupling, but that's where K2View comes in. So to give you a perspective of how K2View is solving this decoupling into the digital entity, there's an important, unique concept we have called the micro database. And so the micro database, if you look over here on the left, we're going to assume that your large enterprise environment is going to have a great diversity of different data sources. In this example here, we have lots of interactions that are happening, maybe over a Kafka queue. Maybe you have CRM instance, it's an Oracle. Maybe you have some Pega in place that's managing different invoice and payments workflow. You've got networking events that are coming across different systems. And you're also getting fed data that's relevant for prediction systems, AI and ML systems. The goal of the digital entity is to be an extremely flexible data store that can accommodate all of these different data types, so that now as a tester, when I reference test data, I say, I want a person, and I want a person that looks in a certain way. I want Janet's data, and I want Janet's specific profile, and I want that data to be provisioned Under the covers, there's a lot of important engineering to make sure that data is secure, that it is encrypted in K2View, that it is cached for very quick access when the testers need it. And then also getting back to the benefit of cost savings, this is a very, very, very small data footprint. So all the expense that we had in the past about I have to have QA that has the same amount of hardware as production, we're going to limit that drastically. So now we're talking about provisioning data based on the business context, which is the person. So Janet has her own microdatabase. Other folks have their own microdatabase as well. John has his. And so from this microdatabase, when I go to provision data to my new application, my new web or cloud-based NoSQL data store, I'm thinking about it in a business term. K2View is managing the plumbing under the covers to do the masking and the structuring of data properly, but I'm able to interact with the data in a much more familiar way. And so to lay this change out from sort of an architectural perspective, on the bottom here, we've got all these different production systems. The production systems today are in the traditional mode, pushing data to test environments, but it's very time consuming. It requires data engineering teams. It requires batch cycles and processes that are we're going to have to request data once a month or once a quarter. And then after it goes through that, then we have to massage the data. We have to go call out to our masking platform. And then we have to bring folks back in and they have to push it downstream. And then in this process, you get issues of overriding data. And are we going to reserve certain data sets, or can you overwrite my data, but only in these specific rows that I have reserved in an Excel spreadsheet? So there's lots of challenges, lots of ways that are slowing this process down, simply because the technology traditionally has required this very bulk, slow movement to ensure all the complexities and all the referential integrity. In this new world, since we are modeling the data as digital entities, the masking is going to happen in this middle layer here. The maintenance of the referential integrity, all the sequences, all of the changes across technologies. Maybe it's stored as a string in one system, and then it's an integer and a number downstream in a different system. Maybe it's on the source, it's actually a check scanned image, and downstream you want it to be a PDF. All that complexity is going to be accommodated, but it's going to go through a middle tier, which is very familiar to the business. And this is, in fact, the digital entity. This is what's going to allow us to move from many different sources of disparate data types and different technologies to different targets in our test environments, or even from, let's say, lower test environment to a higher test environment, because many organizations will promote test data along as they're promoting the test code. And because this is pulling it in real time, there's no downtime for your testers. Your testers are moving faster. The applications are getting certified and approved faster. The masking is now going to be consistent, which is extremely important, because if we mask Wes as Larry in the lower test environment from the CRM system to the mainframe system, in the QA environment, Wes needs to be masked as Larry in each of these different data sources here. So the consistency is going to be ensured throughout the test data process. And lastly, any subset can be chosen. So the testers can come in and they can say, I want to subset based on my understanding of the business and these specific test cases that the testers have had, whether that data may exist in the system, or maybe it does not exist, or maybe there's some profile of good looking data in production that we want to mimic. And we say, hey, I want to make some clones of that specific data. And let's say, that particular digital entity, and I want a bunch of copies of that in the test environment. That's the type of decoupling that we want to enable for the testers. And so lastly, when we look at the biggest benefits, once you have that decoupling, you're able to deliver software at a much greater pace. The shift left initiatives of your application leads and the folks who are leading the overall software delivery, they're enabled. They are enabling the CI/CD pipeline. Now they're enabling the test data pipeline. The test coverage is greatly improved because we have a diversity of data that testers can very quickly spin up through a nice self-service interface. And lastly, the costs are greatly reduced. The time to solution is reduced. So your test staffing costs are improved. Your infrastructure costs are greatly improved because you do not have to have all of this heavy infrastructure to maintain the large data sets for your test data warehouse or your testing environments. It's nimble. It's just some specific subsets that are unique to that data set. So that's the high level benefits that we wanted to go over. Now, I appreciate everyone's time listening with us on around this content. I'm going to hand it back to Larry and Alyssa for a final poll question, and then any final Q&A you guys might have.
All right. Thanks, Wes. Let me take a minute to post the last poll. Okay.
All right, great. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to go ahead and turn on our video again here. And then Wes, we can just give it a couple more minutes here and see if we've got some folks who are going to submit a few questions, and then we can try to address those for the audience. And again, appreciate very much everybody taking time to join us. And hopefully that this has been about the right amount of content and about the right amount of time that you can afford for these kind of events during the course of a busy work day. Alyssa, any questions that we can try to address for everybody?
Yeah, it looks like we have a couple of questions, Larry. Let's go ahead and start. The first one says, can you please provide an example of how unstructured test data is incorporated? Wes, can you speak to that?
Yes, happy to, Alyssa. We were working with a financial services organization where an important next step for the growth of their test data team was to take on the masking of unstructured data. But for them, unstructured data included things like scanned images that are relevant for the business. Sometimes those were Word documents with images embedded. Sometimes it was PDFs. It was just a great disparity of different types of text. Then also people talk about unstructured data sometimes as large text content. It could be logs, or it could be the output of chat conversations. All these different types of unstructured data needed to be masked during the application testing process. So because the digital entity modeled, let's say, as a customer for this client, we attached all of the scanned images, we attached all of the logs and the text to that individual customer instance. So in the end, the testers were able to say, I want to provision test data for a customer that has these types of content in their chat transcript and these types of images. We're able to manufacture downstream a lot of the images and unstructured content for them. And at the end of the day, the masking was all still maintained. So we were scanning the images, we were looking for sensitive PII, replacing it with the consistency downstream. And so they were able to continue and grow the scope of their test data team, but also including all the unstructured data that was part of the new applications. Larry, did I miss anything there, or anything else that you might want to add for content?
No, just having spent some time in the chat world in my previous lives, I know that different lines of business can implement different kinds of capabilities. So, you know, I know that's where we get the opportunity with the digital entity to actually prescribe a very consistent way to mask data across lines of business so that referential integrity is maintained. So no, I think you nailed it on the head.
All right. Thanks, guys. Let's move on to our next question. Let's see. We struggle with testers corrupting each other's data when sharing a single test environment. Can you describe how you would recommend preventing this?
Yes, absolutely. And it's very similar to the way that the software developers would think about maintaining the safety of the work they've done building code. And it's around versioning. We have a term we use called data flux, which is to say, I know that I have some data that lives in production, and it's perfect from a test case perspective because it's unique and there's some timing associated with it. The data is aged properly, where all of the statement dates and all these things line up just perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provision that into my test data warehouse, but I'm going to snapshot it with a version. So before I push it down into my lower test environment, I have that version. It's unique to me. It's going to be maintained for a certain number of days, which is most convenient for how long I need to run the test. Then I'm going to push it downstream to my test environment, and I don't have to go ask other testers to please avoid overriding this test data or log reservation in a spreadsheet. The data is clean, it's available. If anything goes sideways in the test data environments, I just go back to my version and reload it again. I don't have to have that concern of losing my important data.
Hey, Wes, while you were talking, Liz, I don't know if you saw it or not, but there was one that came in, a new question came in at the same time. And I'll go ahead and read this one off to you here. Does the tool virtualize the target environments, or just provision the data and load to the existing target environments?
Good question. The K2View tool is primarily focused on provisioning data to target environments. However, I would say that included in the test data warehouse for K2View is a lot of interesting capability to expose data through web services. So primarily, we're talking about provisioning from any set of sources to any set of targets. And we just want to be a lightweight fabric laying on top of that architecture. However, there are a few edge case scenarios where the test data capability within K2View would expose the data via web service, or it would push it to a native Kafka queue. So it is a little bit dependent on the customer and the architecture that we solution for them. But primarily, it is many-to-many test data target to source environment provisioning.
Great. Thanks, Wes. All right. It looks like we have one more. Let's see. Do you have any sample business cases or ROI materials to help us justify investment to leadership?
Good question. So we looked at a little bit of that stuff, Wes, and hopefully, again, folks took some screenshots there, and we're happy to entertain any requests to dig into that data a little bit more deeply. But what else would you add there, Wes?
Yeah, very often I would say the ROI and the business case come around aligning with the overall organization's desire to speed up the overall application certification process. We talk to a lot of folks that say, we just got a new VP of application, he's coming in, and or even the existing VPs of software development are reading all about the benefits of increasing their software delivery and software velocity. And so they've made these great gains by bringing in new tools, Jenkins, Bamboo, otherwise to do that. But now the test data component is the laggard in the system. And so everyone's kind of got their eyes set on test data and how have we done this traditionally and how does that batch process look? And the test data managers say, we're obviously, we've got a refined process. But I would say that's the biggest area is how can we increase the time to market and also grow the scope of the test data team, because with the existing test data team, if the application growth, the digitization is increasing, that's more work for the test data team, but let's help them get more work done in less time.
Okay, awesome.
Great.
Anything else, Alyssa?
I believe we've answered all the questions, Larry. Those are great questions. Thanks, guys.
Okay, fantastic. Well, again, we'd really like to tell everyone thank you very much for sharing some time with us this morning. Again, it's precious, and we're appreciative that you took it with us. So I'd like to wish you a really good rest of the week, and hopefully that you're able to achieve everything that you want to in test data management, all of your application development goals. Thanks, everyone.
One reminder, everyone, you can still answer the poll questions. We'll leave them up for a few more minutes. All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.